welcome to today's Media and PR 101 for entrepreneurs. It's 12:01, so we're going to get started, but if you trickle in after that, that's a-okay. First of all, before we begin properly, I understand that we're meeting virtually, but we are meeting on the land of the Nunangal people, and I'd like to pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. I extend that respect to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders who are joining us today. Thank you so much for allowing us to be here. And I'd also like to welcome our guests. Thank you so much for taking time to participate in this lunch and learn, but because it's global, it's also a dinner and learn or a midnight snack and learn or somewhere in between. So we're just very thrilled to have you here. Quickly, I'd like to share a little bit about the Canberra Innovation Network. Our attendees probably know us very well, but our distinguished panel might have just Googled us. So just some background, we're a not-for-profit that was launched by a progressive local government in collaboration with Canberra's world-class education and research institutions. Our mission is to empower entrepreneurs to make an impact and change the world. No small task. In doing so, we strengthen the position of Canberra as a clever, connected, and creative city where entrepreneurs and businesses can build on the city's excellence in research and innovation and create social change and economic benefits for everyone. It's my job here to help the inventors and the game changers who come through our programs and workshops, who receive our grants and our mentorship to grow from garage businesses of one or two people to the global stage. My KPI is for people when they think of Canberra to think, hey, the ACT is the new Silicon Valley. Which sounds like a stretch until you look at your rent here in the ACT, but really it isn't. Our city has so much to offer, and it brings me great joy to bring attention to all the amazing things that you, our innovators, are helping us do. 3/4 of which are way above my head. So many of you are doing like quantum supercomputers and turning CO2 into building materials, and like WTF, like how do you do that? I really will never understand. I'm a simple journo with a little bit of PR in the background, but it's up to me to help bring those stories of the amazing things that you do to the local, national, and global stage. So I would like to just point out some points for our conversation today. Participants, you can use the chat functionality in Zoom to ask questions or just call a pause and be like, I don't know what that term means, because we are definitely coming into this from a beginner space. So I'm understanding that most of our participants have ideas and businesses, but don't necessarily know what a press release is or what assets, what content you need before you approach an editor or a reporter, or how the hell do you approach an editor or a reporter? And that's what we're going to be getting to through today's conversation. And I do want it to be a conversation, so it's not going to be like a PowerPoint. So before going ahead, I would like to welcome you all here, and I'll give you a brief intro to our wonderful panel. First of all, Tim Shaw. Tim and his producers have read or tried to read more press releases over the last 25 years than he or they care to remember. How does your message get past the gatekeeper, which is normally the producer or the editor? And how do you end up getting an interview on the radio, on television, in a newspaper, on an online news article, or on shared social media? The secrets to success lie in the who, what, where, when, and why. The secret also hinges on KISS. Keep it simple, stupid. To tell the story, you need to sell the story by identifying who your audience really is for the unique information you want to share. Tim has worked in the talk radio industry for over 25 years, an ideal place to have a conversation about new ideas and innovation. He's a director of the National Press Club of Australia in Canberra, an institution that has hosted some of the most important conversations key to the national narrative. He's built a business from zero sales turnover to $1 million in its first year. He authored his book bestseller. He's got it right there. And Tim Shaw's Sales Success Secrets. For more about the man, please visit www.timshaw.com.au. Please welcome Tim Shaw.
Thank you, Joshua.
Next up, we've got Rachel Hills, who I had the pleasure of working with at the start of both of our careers, back at what was then called 9MSN. Rachel Hills started doing PR for other people and successfully doing PR for her own projects as an author, producer, and entrepreneur. As principal of Protagonistic, a feminist strategic communications agency, she works with social enterprises around the world to refine their messages and get their stories out to the world. She's a former journalist for publications like the Sydney Morning Herald, The Atlantic, the New York Times, Cosmopolitan, and Vogue, and still the occasional freelance features writer. And she continues to receive 1 billion press releases a day. She has strong opinions about what good press outreach looks like. And you can learn more about protagonistic.net. You can learn more about her work at protagonistic.net or at Rachel Hills, HILLS.net. Please welcome Rachel Hills. And finally, another friend for decades, Almira Bardai is one of North America's leading experts in brand building and communications. She spent the last 2 decades creating powerful narratives for both domestic and global brands, and is the recipient of the Enterprising Woman Magazine 2016 Enterprising Woman of the Year Award, Canada's Top Female Entrepreneurs of 2016, 40 Under 40 2016, and a finalist in Vancouver's YWCA Women of Distinction Awards. She's also a thought leader on issues affecting the PR industry. She appears as a commentator in the media and is actively sought after as a speaker. We're lucky to have her on both PR and entrepreneurial topics. Her expertise lies in developing strategic PR communications and social media plans focused on brand experiences, brand awareness, and user engagement. Her results-driven integrated strategies deliver massive results. Almira co-founded and was co-CEO of Jibe PR and Digital, one of Canada's top PR and boutique social media agencies. They've got offices in Toronto, Los Angeles, Vancouver, and she is passionate about her desire to see women rise up both personally and professionally and to eradicate inequality at all levels. So we have some super amazing folks. You guys as attendees have some super amazing ideas, and what I'm hoping for through today's quick hour is to connect the dots between the two. So what I would like to do is throw it to the panel to talk a little bit about how you approach PR folks and journalists and editors with your idea in order to make them pop and in order to get them off the desk. Everything is very personal. I remember when I was at 9MSN, my voicemail message was, "Hi, you've reached me. I will never answer this phone. Please email me your press release." But that was different from the person next to me who only went through the phone. So everything is very personal. We all have different ways of approaching things. And that's why I'm so excited to have this panel that has very diverse experiences. So I might start with Tim. Tim, if you can tell us a little bit about what makes an idea pop, what you get across in your inbox that makes you think, I need to contact my editor and make a feature out of this. And also just some do's, some don'ts, some personal anecdotes. Over to you, Tim.
Yeah, thank you. And it's great to be with Rachel and Almira. And if I work backwards, the last 5 years in Canberra, the national capital of Australia, where we have some incredible and remarkable innovators, there was a time where we wanted to celebrate that literally every day. And my producer would sometimes get a telephone call from a really proactive business owner and a business that had just won an award, and they were so excited they wanted to pop it and share it with us. Generally, my producer would say, that sounds great. I think Tim would be interested in that. Because I had sat down with my producer and said, these are the people, this is our community. We are a local program. Let's talk to our local community. So we would frame our programming around those people that were prepared to pick up the phone, prepared to actually give us that elevator pitch. Because at the end of the day, you've got to connect the dots, but you're connecting with people. And through that producer to the presenter, whether it be a talk radio show that I've hosted talk radio over the last 25 years, from a local Canberra radio program with local and federal politics, innovation and business, to a national overnight program from midnight to 5:30 in the morning, where I was covering world events, to a local sleepless audience right around Australia on 45 radio stations. We're local to our legal program, and I'm not a lawyer, but getting across issues, you've got to tell your story and you've got to sell your story. So how do you do that? In our programming, from the media perspective, we wanted to celebrate women in business. We wanted to celebrate new designs and innovations. We wanted to also keep it simple, stupid, and get the basic information that we could give to our audience so that they could understand that bite. So my first tip to everyone is, you love your business, you're passionate about your design or your idea, you just sold a big contract overseas. Well, that's something to celebrate. Is it the first time it's been sold overseas? Is it a brand new innovation? Try and find the key words that are going to click straight away with the gatekeeper, the producer or the editor, or excite the journalists, because the journalists wrote about this story 2 years ago, but there was no one in Australia doing it. Are you the first in Australia to do it? A quick story, fast rewind to 1992, when Bell South from the United States, Cable and Wireless from the United Kingdom, and Main Nicholas, a big transport company in Australia, created Optus Communications. Their simple message was yes, Y-E-S. Because Telecom Australia, for about 90 years, had kind of said to a lot of customers, no, we can't do it tomorrow. You can't connect your phone. No, you can't. So they turned the challenge of the marketplace in telecommunications at that time to a yes solution. And I created a business from $0. We turned over $1 million in our first year, because we embraced that simple yes philosophy and worked out how to make that work for us locally. That's a little sidebar story about how a bigger message can be made a local message. The second thing that we did in the Canberra radio program was looked at the Canberra innovation, the awards, who's been doing what in the business community. And of course, through meeting and networking through great Canberra innovation events like yours, you're going to meet and greet a lot of people that can be conduits to your business. Another key example, because Canberra is the federal capital, you've got all that federal policy being developed. How is that national policy going to impact, or what can I do from that national policy out of Parliament House, Canberra, that I can leverage to my local market? So Josh, the key issues are, to me, because if I want that press release to make sense to me, I've got to see those keywords right up the front. I've got to be able to embrace that and go, yeah, he or she is going to be a great interview on my radio program. That's going to be a really good podcast that I can do. I can embrace that individual on my panel. And if I can just spend 1 minute on lobbyists. We affectionately, as journalists in Canberra, refer to the lobbyists as log rollers, because they're rolling a log up the hill, hoping that their policy is going to actually be adopted by the federal government of the day. But some lobbyists have done an incredibly good job at marketing and communicating their organisation by being spokespeople on various panel shows like The Drum, the vignette on what impact will this new policy from the federal government have on the building industry. Well, of course, the master builder's spokesperson will be standing up and he'll do that 30-second grab. And he or she will keep that message so simple and repeat that message to be able to get on the television news that night, to be able to be invited onto that panel. So be light on your feet, keep it simple, stupid, and ask this question: who am I? What am I about? Where am I based, or where is my product going to have an impact? Who, what, where, when, and when is it available? When can I be available for your program? So those simple messages, I'll never forget, and because Almira's so celebrated in Canada, I remember studying at Macquarie University, Marshall McLuhan, who talked about the medium is the message. And that was a really resonant, important philosophy about what is your message and by what medium will you distribute and embrace that. And I know Almira is nodding, but that really connected with me. My background also in television, we sold over $100 million worth of product on television through Demtel, which is a demonstration television home shopping company for our North American friends. And I only had 2 minutes to tell and sell that story. And it was who, what, where, when, and why. What's in it for me? And why should I get excited and get off my couch and go and pick up that telephone and ring the 008 023 025 number? I still remember it after 25 years. No internet, no socials. That was pure connect, tell, and sell. So I get excited when someone can tell me a story and sell it to me, because then I become an advocate, better understanding about what you're doing in your business. And I've got a special offer for our panelists today. The first 5 that contact me after the panel will receive an autographed copy of Success Secrets.
I hope that I am also included in that number. Tim, I love the tell and sell. That's exactly what we need to do. We need to tell our story and be able to sell it in to an audience that, you know, doesn't give a F when they're just opening their paper, turning on the radio, watching the television passively. We need to break through that noise. 2 things that I wanted to talk to you further about before we talk with the rest of our panel. One is about how do you get into the news cycle when the news cycle might have already been there? Like, how do you spin your story a little differently? I'll give a personal example just because I'm allowed. So recently, Canberra was announced as the new cybersecurity place in the world. We're getting an investment of $700,000 from the government to set up cyber workshops and plans and programming. And it made it into the Canberra Times and the Sydney Morning Herald and blah, blah, blah. But I just have managed to get further details from the folks that are going to put together those programs. How do I get back into the press when, you know, the big banner announcement, Canberra is the new Silicon Valley, made it into the headlines, but now I've got the stuff that's in the weeds? How do you get the details out after the fact?
My response after only a short period in Canberra was meeting 2 remarkable women, former ACT Senator Kate Lundy, who has experience in the cybersecurity and cyberspace area, and the former
She's a good friend of Sebrin as well.
Yeah, and the former federal member for Canberra, Gabe Rotten, is also working in this space. These amazing women, both public representatives in their career, are more than happy to sit down and have a very nice cup of tea and share with you who they know. So that tell and sell can be that one-on-one, which I know both Rachel and Almira are going to talk about the connectivity and that direct approach to the journalist and finding out about that. The kind of reverse applies. Go to a source and be able to talk to that source who may end up being an advocate for your innovation because they're in that space. They have greater connections than you do. And how do you bring what you're doing? And they'll pull you up and they'll say, I get where you are, but there's a guy down the road that's doing that. What's the other side of your business? So don't be afraid to talk to an expert, Joshua. Short answer. Don't be afraid to talk to someone who's not a journo, not a public relations expert, but can embrace and connect your idea very quickly. And then you can take those takeaways from that, and then potentially, I think, expand your network because you're talking to two highly regarded, in this case, former public officials who are now working in that space. That would be my tip.
And Tim, I guess it's also just the confidence of, I'm not necessarily breaking the story, but I'm bringing something different, something nuanced, something more important to that, clickbait headline that you might have read last week.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's fantastic. Rachel, we met way too long ago at 9MSN when we were in the business of clickbait, getting people through the homepage to click on, crocodile ate my baby type situations. And I don't know, football star caught doing something bad, but we also came to it with journalistic integrity. And that is why our friendship has continued. So I would love for you to talk a little bit about what you think about selling a story in. What do you think is important about that? And what elements really need to be there in order to go to the press and say, this is worth real estate on your homepage?
Yeah, I mean, that's a big ask, real estate on the homepage. Let's start with getting a story. And first I want to say, Tim, I really appreciate your warmth and positivity when you talked about getting PR, because I know that not all journalists feel that way when they're on the receiving end of press inquiries. So it was so refreshing to hear someone who was so warm and loving about getting those inquiries. From my part, I come at this from 3 different angles that all kind of meld together to inform my approach to selling stories. I've worked as a journalist, primarily as a features journalist for many magazines and newspapers and websites around the world. I'm a social enterprise owner myself who will be hiring a PR person in the next few months. Which will be an interesting and somewhat scary experience. And I also work as a PR and strategic communications person myself, which I started doing through my experiences seeking PR for my own work as an author and a producer and other sorts of things. So yeah, I've been on the receiving end of a lot of media releases. I've sent media releases on the behalf of myself and others. And my approach to selling stories as a PR person is really very much informed by my experience as a journalist. So my first thought as both a journalist and a PR person is that I think that when a lot of people are approaching, when they're first thinking of getting media for their company or for their project or something they're working on, the place where most people start is the media release, which I believe Almira is going to explain in more detail later how to write a good one. But essentially it's a one-pager where you explain what your company is, what it does, and you frame a story around it. And a lot of people put a lot of effort into that. And it is real, and the media release is important. But in my experience, at least as both a journalist and a PR person, it's not how you sell the story. And it's not the thing that makes or breaks whether your project or your company is going to get coverage. To me, what is much more important is firstly figuring out what your story is, which is usually going to be something that is a little bit different to what your company does. Like there's, I am passionate about social enterprise as a social entrepreneur, but the reality is that most companies are not stories in and of themselves. So the first art to figuring out how to get people to pay attention to what you're doing is to figure out what that what the biggest story is, the so what about your company's existence. And the second thing that's really important in selling your story is figuring out both who you want to hear about your story, so who you're trying to reach and get to hear about what you're doing, but also who wants to hear your story. So what publications or what radio programs or what websites are covering the sort of work that you do. And then when I'm working with clients, I go into it on a very granular level. So I don't just look at which publications are covering something, but I'll go and look at which journalists are covering the issues. And then beyond that, and this is super important, it's not just what people are covering, but it's also how people are covering it as well. So say, for example, I'll think of a media release that I get a lot of media, and the problem with a lot of PR targeting and why it doesn't work is that the pitches are often only partially targeted rather than totally targeted. So for example, as a features journalist, I wrote a lot about feminism and women's issues, and I also wrote a book called The Sex Myth. So because I wrote a book with sex in the title, I get media releases every single day from people about their sex products. But if those people actually read any of the articles that I've ever published, they would know that I don't think I have ever written a single article about a sex product or about products in general, because I'm a features journalist. So what I'm looking for if a media release is going to resonate with me when it lands in my inbox, I'm looking for the so what, which is what is the connection between what your company does. And if you ever want to pitch me, it definitely does not have to be a sex company. I really welcome other sorts of pitches as well. But I'm looking for the connection between what a company or what a product does and the biggest socio-political picture. So how does what you're doing fit into broader cultural conversations? How does it fit into, and Tim was talking about what's happening in government in Canberra. Because when I'm pitching a story to a publication to then get your company covered, well, to be honest, if I'm a journalist, I don't really care about getting your company covered. I care about getting the story up. But I'm looking for what is the interesting story I can tell about the world and how it is, which is also going to be of more interest to the editor. And so the company is part of that story, but for me, it's really the whole hook. So when I'm doing PR for people, I'll often look at what is the biggest story that's attached to that. Another couple of pieces of advice that I have as both a journalist and a PR person is that journalists today are really busy. I find that they are busier now than I think they were 10 years ago when Josh and I were working at 9MSN. An example from my personal life is I used to have a weekly column with a national publication in the US, and I would submit my copy, and I never heard back from my editor. I thought my editor hated me because she never responded to my emails. It turns out she loved me because I was delivering her good copy. But my point is my editor was so busy that she did not have time to answer emails from her regular contributor, let alone a random PR person or entrepreneur who's emailing her. So when you're getting into somebody's inbox or on their phone, although I suspect probably phone is a less popular way of reaching journalists these days because most millennials hate phone calls, myself included, you've got to break through all of that noise. And the other thing I keep in mind is that because a lot of journalists are busy, and this has been true for more than 10 years, you often want to kind of spoon feed them the story. You don't want them to have to look at your media release and then do a kind of cognitive gymnastics to figure out what the story is. You want to lay it out. So when I'm pitching, I'll often keep the original email that I send to a journalist really brief, like just a few sentences, and then offer to send them the media release if they have more interest. I get way better responses than when I send them the media release. But also, off the best media release, once you've got someone interested, is a media release that could almost be copy pasted onto a website or into a newspaper. And again, as a feature journalist, it's not how I operate because I'm all into the analysis. But I remember even when I was 20 years old, I was working a university job in PR at an accounting firm, and I wrote media release that got picked up and copy pasted directly into the Australian Financial Review, which I found remarkable at the time. But even then that was happening, and it's a long time ago now that I was 20, as Josh can vouch.
I will not vouch for that because that would also out me. But Rachel, yes, that's exactly true. When we were at what was then 9MSN, now 9, we were getting 100 plus emails a day. But then the thing that annoyed me the most was when you would get a press release and 5 minutes later your phone would ring. And it would be the PR saying, "Hi, I'm wondering if you got my press release." And to the point that I changed my voicemail message to, "Hi, you've reached Joshua. I'm the editor of whatever. I don't ever answer this telephone. Send me an email." So it's about getting your story forward in a way that is easy enough for someone who's super busy to just copy, paste, and use. Again, as Rachel said, as a features writer, you're going to take that in a different way. But if as an entrepreneur, you're wanting to get your name, your idea, everything out there, just put something forward that you think like don't have any, you can't feel self-conscious if you don't get a byline, because that's not what you're in the business for. You're here to get your idea out. Someone's going to have their name next to what you wrote. But as long as you've got the story in a way that can translate to the particular medium, like if you're writing about a sex toy, don't write a sex toy article for Rachel. Her book, The Sex Myth, is very different from that. Know who you're sending your release to and write it in a way that they can just copy paste, publish, and then you have a much better chance of being included. Another thing I would add is to have the assets available so that when you do have a journalist who's doing due diligence and is not just going to copy paste like the AFR or all of us, that when they come back to you and say, do you have a quote? Do you have some high-res images that we can use? Do you have any video? That you've got these assets about your company, it's your baby, that you can share, that then they can on share. So Rachel, thank you. That was fantastic. And I'm very excited now to introduce Almira once again, who is our PR guru, and to hear about what sparks her interest when people come to her with ideas and say, I need you to PR this. Like it's a business that has been stereotypified by like AbFab, but it's an actual business. And some of you might need to engage the help of PR professionals, whether you do or not. Almira will let us know, but she'll also let you know some tips from inside the industry. Almira.
Thank you. Oh, I wish those days of PR were like AbFab and drinking champagne. It doesn't exist. Certainly doesn't. In my own mind, right? But yeah, certainly what I do is when clients come to me, companies come to me, and I'm the middle person between them, their story, crafting that story, and the journalist. My job is to have those media contacts. And whether or not I may have them in a specific sector, so things like consumer goods or tech, I actually don't do tech PR because you very much need to have your contacts. And of course, everybody's looking to connect with American publications for tech, and I don't have those. One tip is that if you are looking to get into the American media, American journalists love to be pitched by Twitter, which is something that other countries' journalists don't necessarily like to do that. And really Canadian ones don't, but Canadian tech probably would. So it's, every country, every industry has their different ways of pitching them. So you want to do that research as well. What is the format? So your format of getting your press release is to email them. But yeah, going back to it, my job is to get my clients into the media. And we'll talk about how the media has also changed so much. It used to be very much about myself as the PR or my team. We have our media contacts, we have our lists that we work from of either existing contacts, or we'll research and do more work about who's covering the industry and put them onto our target list, and we craft the story and we pitch it. And it's really different now in terms of, again, it was just that PR person contacting the media, great, and making sure the story was newsworthy. We do all of that work. And I joke that I often have clients who call me and they're like, what about this? And I'm like, that's such a bad idea. I won't even take you, because, and I'm an entrepreneur myself, so I feel like I can say it, but every entrepreneur thinks they have a really great story in their business, but you have to have a great story. That's the big thing. It has to be interesting. And, especially if there's a journalist who's already written exactly the same story about your competitor, you can't be contacting them and say, hey, do contact me for interview. They're going to be like, no, we've already done this. So you need to find another different angle. There always has to be that freshness, that newsworthiness to everything. But again, going towards how much the media has changed. Now, of course, my background is I'm in Canada, and our media industry over the past 10, 15, 5, 2 years has been decimated, particularly by social media and owned channels. So you should also be looking at the opportunities that you have for your company blog on your website, or particularly yourselves as entrepreneurs and CEOs, your own LinkedIn, and doing thought leadership from that way. What I do now, so I actually sold my agency and now I'm consulting, and I act as a company's chief marketing communications officer. I actually hire other agencies and specifically public relations thought leadership people who will craft amazing ghostwritten articles that they then submit to like a Forbes or an Entrepreneur, the big ones. And it's a very well crafted campaign to really raise that specific entrepreneur's profile. So that's something that's really available to you guys. Tim also spoke about awards. That is a great way to get coverage. But now also paid editorial. And that is something that was such a no-go. You would never pay for stories. Even as much as about 3 years ago, it was kind of done, but not really. But again, this is for Canada. I'm not as familiar with other countries, but we just don't have enough media left, or everybody's going bankrupt. So it's become something that it's an evil necessity, if you will. But what I love about paid editorial actually is you actually get a journalist who writes it and you get to control the message. Because here's the thing, when you're pitching earned media, you do that interview, you do your pitch, and I realize I'm using the word pitch quite often, so I hope I'm being clear. So you actually have to email the media to pitch. And just as Rachel said, you'll have a short sentence, or I usually actually do 3 short paragraphs, actually explaining who I am, what I want to talk to you about, what the story is, bullet points about what you want to talk about, paste the press release in the body of the email, and go. And that's the way that they want to receive it. Super simple, but they have to, just like Tim and Rachel both said, journalists get so many pitches. You got to get them in there. You got to tell them, exactly what they're going to get. But then also when I was saying about when you actually pitch the story or they pick it up and you talk to the journalist, you can't control what they're going to write. And so the beauty of paying for that editorial is that it's well written by a journalist. I never recommend that a company actually writes the story themselves. You're going to have too much marketing talk in there. And journalism is a very different style of writing. The credibility, the story, it's actually very differently written. Anyways, so get them to write it. Pay for it, you get to control the message. Whenever you do have a press release, make sure you have a quote from yourself, the entrepreneur, or whoever is important people in there. No more than 2 quotes though, and always put your most important key message in the quote because the media love quotes. So it's a really good tool to be able to get your quote in there. And then also, talking about the different channels that are available. Again, is your story really newsworthy? If not, put it on your blog. It could be really interesting, but maybe not newsworthy. Put it on your blog. Then on your LinkedIn, do a little summary about it and then click it back, put the link back to your blog post. Sometimes it might just be on social media. Maybe something is for Instagram and it's definitely not newsworthy. You also have to be careful about what you're reaching out to media with, because one bad pitch, you're done. And it really is that hard. Journalists receive so many pitches that if you put the bad one out there, they're going to be like, I'm probably going to move this guy into my spam box. I'm not going to pay attention to what they're saying. And also, PR is a consistent program. If you're working with somebody, a PR person, they will say to you, what else do you have? What other stories? So they can actually plan a strategic campaign. So typically when you work with an agency or just an individual, they will put together the plan and say, okay, this month we're going to pitch this story. And sometimes you don't have to have a press release. I rarely actually use press releases anymore. Mine are just pitches to the media about what my clients could speak about. My biggest client is a cryptocurrency exchange. So you can imagine how busy I am pitching that. Like, you know, Elon Musk puts out an announcement that he's got $1 billion worth of Bitcoin and Tesla. My day is like contacting all the media and saying that my client would love to talk about this. So I'm always watching what media are talking about. How can I talk about my clients? Again, no press release, I'm pitching, I'm looking for those ideas. I'm looking for, women don't know a lot about cryptocurrency. Why don't we pitch women podcasts and teach women about investing in crypto? So again, just lots of ideas. I plan my campaigns. I see what's happening in the media. I might use national days. My beer clients, of course, I'm pitching them for National IPA Day, right? Or if there is the Pride Parade, if you know the nightclubs in town are pitching about what cocktails to have for Pride Parade. There's so much cool stuff happening. Think about how you can tie it in, pitch it, and then again, is this really newsworthy? Should this actually just go on Instagram? Maybe this is something that I should be talking about on Twitter to the community, right? And so I look at everything as a bubble that I see. Okay, here's my story, but what bubble does this belong to? Does this belong to the media? Okay, if so, which media? Is this a TV one? Where should I fit it best? Who would pick up the right story? Who's writing on this, like Rachel said, right? Okay, well, running a contest, media don't care. That will go on Facebook or Instagram. We've got some really cool photos or recipes because we're a restaurant. Great, send it to the food media, but don't forget to put something on Instagram. Again, it's looking at that whole bubble and your own channels and seeing where you put out the story. And just, it's content marketing now. I say that I'm a content marketer. It used to be that public relations was part of marketing. I think now it's part of the greater picture of content marketing. So.
Almira, that's fantastic. I came to CBRN from going into content marketing for the Associated Press. They had never ventured into content marketing, and I went in and wrote the AP style guide for content marketing. And the baseline of it was, I am an editor first. I understand the, church and state barrier. I will only ever produce a piece of content if it services my audience. So just to get rid of advertorial, because obviously advertorial is trash and we're not ever going to look at that. But it's such a great way of thinking about press releases and getting a message out there that it is pure content. It is content marketing, but it's not advertorial. And on that note, I wanted to ask you, because it sounds like you've got like a very holistic view of what when a client says, here's my idea, that you go to them with a plan. When it comes to like an editorial calendar and someone says, I invented, the better mousetrap. How do you take that and say, here's what I reckon you should do?
Yeah. For something like that is, there might be lifestyle publications. They're going to be interested in it. And, is this a more environmentally friendly mousetrap? Well, bingo, you've got stories right there. Is it more humane? That's how you'd want to lead. Joshua invents more humane mousetrap. That's news. You might get some quirky Saturday morning TV news. You'd want to talk about it. Otherwise, putting it all over Instagram. When you have your social media channels, you're not going to just talk about your product, right? You could have these mousetraps going on vacation through Australia. You could have some fun with it, right? It's content marketing now. So those would be looking at it. And again, just like you said, holistically planning out some fun. But again, if you are looking at mom blogs, for example, I'm sure that, moms tend to be the ones who are tasked with the home, right? They're going to be the ones having to deal with the mousetrap. So is there something that you can get onto mom blogs? Or, if you were ever to have a virtual party, sponsor something, just how are you going to get in front of these people also who have eyeballs? That's the biggest thing. And especially, again, I go back to the example of Canada because it's, I'm just in this every day, that our online blog newspapers, they're huge. They have more readers than actual broadsheets and TV here. So sometimes we're not even pitching those. We're looking for the digital ones, or we're looking for bloggers or Instagram influencers who have a much wider audience. So again, there are some women with mom Instagrams, like they've got over 1 million people watching. So if you're trying to tie this to sales, because that's the other part of it, you're not always going to make sales from PR. That's really not the idea. It's about brand awareness. But if you're looking for sales, I would recommend to be going after a mom blogger rather than your TV news.
And I would like to open this up to the entire panel. When you are approaching new media, if you're looking at influencers, how do you pitch them differently than you would send a press release to editor at whatever the publication is?
Yeah, Rachel, I feel like you were nodding. Did you, and Tip, did you guys want to input?
You know, I'm interested in your take on this, Almira, but I have two kind of contradictory thoughts on it. One is that I think pitching influencers is more about the relationship. I think that if you're going to pitch someone to be featured on, say, their Instagram, they want to feel like you're genuinely interested in them. But then the flip side of that is that influencers are far more likely to be pay for play.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So in fact, I don't always work with unpaid influencers. The reason why I like paid is because you can get their analytics and you can see how the campaign performed. You can't do that with unpaid. But if you're ever going to have an event, you can't afford to pay all of them. Although if you pay them, they actually show up, you know, just like media. If you invite influencers to an event, they don't always come. So you have to have that balance. But yeah, I mean, it's not like I have a relationship with every influencer out there. I've got to go and develop it just like I would with media, but pay attention to their things, like their posts on Instagram. I've actually had it happen when one time I emailed an influencer and I was like, I love your stuff. They're like, we've never seen you engage. And so I was like, oh, they actually paid attention, right? So actually develop a little bit of a relationship, even if it's just commenting and liking a few photos, and then approach them. And it has to be personal. And also it has to be targeted, like you say, you know, just like you talked about, you know, a business story being for the business reporter or features being for a features reporter, you have to do the same for influencers. Yeah. You're not going to pitch a tech influencer about your mousetrap unless it really is that much better technology, right? So it has to be deeply, deeply personal to their audience more than ever. That's what an influencer is. They're influencing their audience.
Awesome. Tim.
Interesting on that too. I think, you know, if you've got a brand ambassador, and I'll declare an interest, I've been paid to be a brand ambassador for various companies, and I will, to the lady's advice, I won't accept a company if I don't think they're of quality and the integrity. I've always believed in honesty, integrity, and that at the end of the day, if I won't buy it, I won't use it, then why would I tell other people to do it? That's from an influencer's perspective, a brand ambassador. Right now in Australia, there's great controversy about Netflix doing the Byron Bay Netflix series using influencers that are like blow-ins that have never lived in the community, and the entire community is saying to Netflix, do not come. So it can cause you some real heartache if you choose unwisely. But you know what, Josh, we've got a great question from Simon C here, asking about, you know, that decision and the journey of launching that product, the mainstream media, the general social media or niche social media to build that community. I just wonder if those watching this now can actually tell us, where do they get their news from? Who do they embrace? Because I think that's a great litmus test on the best way for you to be able to tell and sell and communicate about your message. And I asked some young people in Canberra recently, so where do you get your news from? And well, you know, they couldn't really answer me. So you've got to connect. Yes, it's socials. Yes, but you know, how do you find and deliver your message to people that actually aren't tuned in to the medium that you choose? Back to Marshall McLuhan, and the medium is clearly part of the delivery of the message.
Definitely, Simon C. That's a great question, and I think it's one that's near impossible to answer, because I work on a team of, there are 3 of us in our team, and we all come into the office at the same time, and I say, did you hear about that thing on ABC Radio Canberra Breakfast that Lish said? My colleagues are like, no, I didn't listen to that. But did you see this thing on this site, or did you see this tweet? No, I didn't see those either. So we're all very media savvy, but we have our own kind of lanes that we generally follow. So it's really interesting to try and take your business proposition and decide what lane you want to pitch to. So Simon had a follow-up question about common challenges when there are PR and media, given that so many people are working from a public sector environment or a commercial one. So does the panel have any ideas on how to segment your idea or your pitch? Like, is it all about building an audience profile? Is it all about like, I have this new mousetrap, who is it that I want to buy it? Who are the purchasers in charge, and what media do they look at? Like, how do you work that out?
Who wants to take that?
I trust all of you to look at that.
I'd like to answer the first part of Simon's question. That's a bit that I do understand the answer to, or at least have an opinion on. My gut is that in the first instance, as a new business, I would focus on social media and your own content before moving into pitching press, because press are often more interested in larger companies, companies that already have an established following, or that already have an established brand. So my sense would be start with social media and then move on to press, even if that's just a 3 to 6 month difference in how you roll out your promotion. And then as for Canberra, I don't live there, so I can't speak to the specificities of the Canberra media ecosystem, but I know that Tim can.
And it's an interesting point. And Suzanne and Shika and Sandy have spoken about where they get their news from. And there are some terrific community-based and they're profitable businesses. City News, the Riot Act, ABC Radio, of course, is part of the national publicly funded ABC radio network. And the scrutiny of each and every media or publisher is different. And so too are their editors or their radio producers. You can get an interview with Lish Fayer, fantastic. Lish is a local. And if you're talking particularly about the fantastic chicken's eggs that she's got in her back garden, hey, you know, you're on a winner. That's going to create interest. But I do take the point about paid advertorial, where if you're an advertiser in Canberra Weekly, if you're an advertiser with City News, I can't speak for Riot Act, there is that capacity to be able to advertise your product and service, but it is quite likely that there would be an editorial element to that. And many of those community magazines, the weeklies, even the online publications, you know, if it's newsworthy, if its readability is going to entertain that audience and deliver those, they're definitely interested. From the Canberra public servant point of view, we have a highly educated population that are on great salaries, let's face it. And as a result of a public service city with about 2/3 of our public service based in Canberra, you've got a high net worth, relatively speaking, audience that you can tell and sell products to. You also have an amazing defence industries and of course the Australian Defence Force, but you also have an amazing group of local families from all over the world, particularly the 80 diplomatic missions that we have. Quick tip again, if you get an export deal, make sure you let the local embassy, consulate, high commission know, because they'll be part of that network to help share that story. So we've had great success with Aspen Medical, for example, are opening a series of hospitals in Indonesia. And I happened to be with the Indonesian ambassador in Canberra last week, and he was saying how great the work between the University of Tasmania, Monash University and other institutions will be training nurses both in Australia and also Jakarta as part of the expansion of medical services, a dream that came about with Dr. Andrew Rochford, I believe, and also Glenn Keys from Aspen Medical. Amazing Canberra story, but use the bigger networks of others, which I think the ladies would agree that you can start small, but, you know, expand and use other people's networks.
And that's fantastic. I think it's so easy for us to focus on our local markets, but as our new mousetrap starts to be sold or produced in other places, we often forget that we can leverage relationships like embassies and local media in the other markets about jobs being created and all of that. So that's excellent. I know that I value all of your time because this is so great having all of these fabulous people in the same room. I just want to get a couple more questions out there. One would be about the role of PR and marketing as it confluences, if that's a word, with sales and digital and search ads. Is that the provenance of PR to look after digital and search? Is that the provenance of a different marketing person? If you are, running something out of your garage, is that all you? And another question would be the other one that I really wanted to chat about. I'll get back to after you guys have a second with this one.
Yeah. So that's all digital marketing. So it's a sister, a partner to content marketing. Specifically for paid ads, digital marketing, SEO, you do want somebody who's a specialist in that area. I would never allow myself to, I would have to figure it out. And I always joke that I got email when I was 18 years old. I'm 43. Unless you're really, really specialized in this area, you do not want somebody my age doing this, right? It tends to be that younger generation who's grown up with it, who understands it. Again, it's not to say that you cannot learn it, but my belief is it's higher for the best, right? But also it's a very different skill set in terms of public relations. And, a digital marketer could not do my public relations job. It's very specialized as well. And they don't have my contacts, but all those things, ads, SEO, social media ads. And also it's, when it comes to social media ads and all the buying, you want to have a strategy behind it and specific budgets, and also based on outcomes, goals, demographics, who you're trying to target. It's not as simple as just doing these ads. So definitely looking for somebody or an agency who has those skill sets.
I echo that. The different skill sets, I'd sum it up as PR is story, like whether that's pitching press or writing your own content or figuring out what the narrative is or thought leadership or all that sort of thing. And marketing is sales. So it's AdWords, it's paid placements, all that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
I am of a generation, and I'm not a millennial, but there are many of us that are deleting certain social media apps from our devices because of this. I know we can cancel the noise, but at the end of the day, I'm wondering about how effective all of that, Google paid stuff is going to be going forward. Great referral, great connection, and testimonial. I've always supported the idea, and Hal's got a great question about chronic pain here, and concerned that he's been invited to participate in a wonderful television program, but that the particular patient they may have to work with may not want to do the work to prove the theory about how good this chronic pain relief may be. I'm not an expert. The Therapeutic Goods Administration and others have a strong view on all that. But you know what? Ladies, do you think any publicity is good publicity as long as they spell my name right? Do I have to be careful?
I want to make sure that I'm not creating a crisis for myself, right? So, why am I creating more work for myself? But so no, it's not. You want to be careful about it. And I think especially with the advent of social media and the ability for something to go viral, it's not about the old days where you could just have a story killed. It ran in print, it might get picked up on TV, there might be some radio. To a certain degree, it wasn't a crisis like it could be now. Now it's going to live forever digitally, but then you're going to deal with people trolling, commenting, negative comments on social media, everything happening there. Be careful. And why would you go through all of the effort of doing PR and trying to raise brand awareness about you, your company, whatever it might be, only for it to turn into a crisis and tarnish it? And especially if you're a public company, you'll see that in your share price.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of bad publicity. I'm not totally across. I'd want to understand more specifics of that situation and why the television program wants you to work with a specific one of your clients, I assume, rather than their clients. It all seems quite complicated. But yes, not all publicity is good publicity.
Excellent. I want to thank our esteemed panel so much for your time, and also for all the participants. It's been a really informative, really fantastic hour. I'll be sending around some notes later, but thank you all so much for your time. I got a lot out of it. I hope that you did as well. And thank you again to the panelists, and I wish you all well. Thank you so much.